Hello again, my loves. Tonight's story follows Maisie, a 24-year-old shop assistant who has been quietly designing the same little game for 3 years, and Verity Kellaway, the coldest publisher in the business, who rejected it 3 times and then, at a party, refused to let her stand up. What begins as one round of a stupid party game slowly becomes a story about being chosen out loud by the last person you expected. There was one chair too few. That was the whole design of the game, and I want to be fair to it because as a piece of party engineering, it was vicious and elegant, which is what you get when 300 game designers are put in a function room above a pub with a handbell and no adult supervision. It was the second Saturday of October. I was 24. I had been on my feet for 11 hours at the Ashwater Games Fair. I had poured most of a cider down my own front. And when the bell went and the chairs went and I was the one left standing, the rule was clear and the rule was cruel. You sit on the lap of the person you would least like to sit on. 300 people knew exactly who that was in my case. They had all watched the clip. They pointed with both hands. And Verity Kellaway, who had rejected my game 3 times in 3 years, moved her chair back 6 inches, looked at me over the top of her glass, and waited. Then the bell went again for the change, and everybody stood up, and her hand came flat against my waist, and she said, "You don't get up." I have thought about those 4 words every day since. Quick note before we begin. If you want the hotter, uncensored version of stories like this, I share them on my Patreon, GL After Hours. The link's in the description, for whenever you want to stay a little longer inside the story. Let me back up. I worked at Penny Feathers, which was a board game shop on Sallow Street in Ashwater. And if you have never been to Ashwater, picture a small northern city built out of wet brick around a river that has never once been described as picturesque. And then picture it raining, because it was. Penny Feathers was 3 rooms wide and 11 feet deep, and smelled of cardboard, paraffin, and the ghost of a cat. There were shelves to the ceiling. There was a ladder that had killed nobody yet. There was a sign on the door in Hazel's handwriting that said, "We are open, probably," and had said that for 6 years. Hazel Pennyfeather was 69, 4'11", wore her reading glasses on a beaded chain, and called every single customer duck regardless of age, gender, or whether they had just tried to shoplift a deck of cards. She had opened the shop in 1980-something after her husband died, on the theory that grief passes more quickly if you are being beaten at dominoes. She employed exactly 2 people, me 5 days a week, and Nomi Bar, 19 Saturdays, who ran the shop's social media account with the manic energy of a girl who had discovered that strangers on the internet will reply to you at 3 in the morning. Upstairs, above the shop, there was a room with a green baize table, 8 mismatched chairs, a paraffin heater that had to be sworn at, and a window that looked out at the back of a laundrette. That room was the reason I had not left Ashwater. On Tuesday nights, it filled up with people who did not care that I was 24 and had no qualifications, and had once put a rack of dice through a plate glass window. In that room, people played my game. My game was called The Last Fairy. I am going to describe it, because you will need it, and because I have never once been able to describe it without my hands going. It is a cooperative game for 3 to 5 players. You are all islanders on a small island in a bad winter. The island is failing. Every round you draw weather, you lose something, you patch what you can, and you try to keep 4 things alive until spring: the light, the boat, the school, and each other. It is small and quiet, and there are no dragons in it. It takes 90 minutes and everyone loses more than they expect to. And every single round, in the middle of the table, face up, there is one card called Go. Any player may take Go at any time. If you take it, the fairy comes, and you leave, and you win, personally, immediately alone. You get a score. You get to be right. The game ends for everybody else at once, mid-sentence, mid-winter, mid-repair. And the box says, in tiny letters at the bottom of the score pad, only that the island did not make it through. Nobody has to take Go. Nobody is ever punished for taking Go. It sits there for 90 minutes, being possible. That is the game. I designed it when I was 21, and my mother had been dead for a year, and I had exactly one idea in me, and it took 3 years and about 400 evenings in that room over the laundrette to make it work. And in that time, I sent it to precisely one publisher, 3 times. Half Crown. Half Crown was the small prestige imprint inside Belcourt Games, and Half Crown was Verity Kellaway, in the sense that a lighthouse is 1 bulb, 6 titles in 9 years. Every one of them the kind of game that people write essays about. She had designed one herself, at 26, called 9 Hands, which had sold in 11 languages and was on the shelf behind my head in 5 of them, and had, I assume, made her enough money that she never had to be polite to anyone ever again. She had a rule. Everybody in the business could recite it, usually badly, on panels, in the way people quote philosophers they have not read. A game is a promise about how long you'll stay. The first time I read that sentence, I was 19, standing up in this shop, and I had to sit down on the step with the book on my knees, because it was the first time anybody had said out loud the thing I had been circling for years without a word for it. That sentence is the reason I designed anything. That sentence is arguably the reason I am not still working at the garden center, so I sent her the last fairy. The reply took 4 months and came on a postcard. Card, not paper. Cream. Thick, no letterhead. In black fountain pen, in handwriting like a fence, it said, "Not ready." And then underneath, 2 initials. That was the entire postcard. I remember laughing. I remember Hazel taking it out of my hand and reading it twice and saying, "Well, she's not wrong, Duck. The middle bit sags," which is the single most useful thing anyone has ever said to me. And then putting the kettle on. I worked on it for a year. I fixed the middle bit. I sent it again, not ready. I worked on it for another year. I rebuilt the whole weather deck. 22 people played it in that room, and 4 of them cried, which in this business is a positive review. I sent it a 3rd time, and I put a note in the box, and I am not going to tell you what the note said because I still have to live in my own body. Not ready. 3 postcards. 6 words in total, plus a set of initials each time. I had the 3 cards pinned to the wall above the baize table upstairs. Nomi called it the Shrine of Shame and put it on the internet. Obviously. So that is the first thing you need to know about Verity Kellaway and me. Here is the second. 14 months before the party, at the previous Ashwater Fair, I stood up in the audience questions. I want to be clear that nobody made me do this. I was in the 4th row with a lanyard and a tote bag, and my hand went up entirely without permission from the rest of me. She was on a panel about cooperative design. She had been on it for 40 minutes and had said 11 words, and I asked, in front of 200 people, in a voice that came out about a 1/3 higher than my own, whether she thought a cooperative game could carry an emotional argument if the players did not know they were making it. I still think it is a good question. Verity Kellaway looked at me for about 2 seconds. She has pale green eyes, and she does not blink at a normal frequency, and she was, I would later learn, in the middle of the worst month of her professional life. Not that this occurred to me at the time or would have helped. And she said, "Enthusiasm isn't a mechanic." That was all. She turned to the moderator. The panel moved on. Someone in the row behind me made a noise like a small kettle. Someone else filmed it. By Monday, it had been watched 40,000 times. By Wednesday, there was a version with a slide whistle. For an entire year, in a business of maybe 2,000 people who all drink in the same 3 bars, I was the enthusiasm girl. Strangers said it to me at trade stands. A man I had never met said it to me while I was holding a stack of shrink-wrapped card sleeves, and I dropped all of them. Nomi made a mug. I want you to understand that I love her, and that the mug said enthusiasm isn't a mechanic on one side, and it's a medical condition on the other, and that I drank out of it every day because if you drink out of the thing, it cannot drink out of you. I have opinions about coping. So, 3 postcards, 1 clip, 1 year. That is the woman I was told to sit on. The Ashwater Games Fair happened in the 2nd week of October, in the Old Wool Exchange, which is a beautiful building in the way that a beautiful building can also be freezing. 3 floors, 400 tables. Everybody in the country who has ever glued felt to cardboard, all in one room, all with a cold. I did not want to go. I had a table anyway, because Hazel had entered me for it in August without telling me, and then said, "You can't have a shop stall and a shrine of shame, Duck. It's bad for trade." I had 30 copies of The Last Fairy. I had made them myself. Hand-cut card, printed at the place by the station, boxes I had folded on the baize table until my thumbs bled and Nomi had to take over. The rulebook had a typo on page 4 that I could see from space. The box lid had my name on the bottom corner in 8-point type M. Quill. Because I had put it there at 2 in the morning and then been too embarrassed to take it off. 30 copies, £6 each to make. My whole savings, which tells you everything about my savings, I sold for. I want to tell this part quickly because it still catches me under the ribs. I sat at that table for 11 hours. I explained the Go card 200 times. People picked up the box, turned it over, said, "Oh, it's a nice quiet one," in the voice you use for a dog that is not going to be any trouble, and put it down. At 2:30, a man explained my own game to me for 6 minutes. At 4 o'clock, a woman said, "Is this the enthusiasm one?" And I said yes, and she laughed kindly, which was worse. And at 5:30, with the hall emptying and my voice gone and my 4 sold copies rattling around in a shoebox where 30 had been, a man in a very good coat sat down opposite me, uninvited, in the chair where the players go. "Gideon Pace," he said. "Belcourt." He was about 55, and he had the specific glow of a man who has never once been cold in a wool exchange. He picked up my box. He did not open it. He turned it over, read the back panel in about 4 seconds, and put it down again, and he said, "It's the fairy, isn't it? The little one about staying. I've heard about this," I said, in a voice like a mouse, that he had heard about it. "People are talking about it upstairs," he said. He smiled at me. "Get it in front of the right desk, and this is a real book, a real book with your name where it should be." He put a card down on the box lid, one finger on it, and slid it across the table like a man moving a piece. "Come and see me. Don't be shy about it. Shy costs money." I picked up the card. "Commercial director," it said. And then he said, over his shoulder, already going, the way you drop a coin into a slot, "Just don't let Kellaway sit on it again."
If this story stayed with you, hit subscribe so the next one can find you. Stay close.
I went to the after party because Nomi physically took my elbow. It was in the function room over the weighing house, which is the pub on the corner by the exchange, and by 9 o'clock, there were 300 people up there and the windows had gone white with breath. There was a bar with 2 staff on it, and a queue with 112. There was a man doing card tricks badly. There were 4 separate groups playing 4 separate games on the floor, because you cannot put this many designers in a room and expect chairs to be used correctly. I had a cider. I had another one. I had a third one down the front of my cardigan, which is the mustard one, with the hole in the cuff where I once melted it onto a soldering iron while wiring a light into a prototype nobody ever played. And at about 10, a man called Rufus, who runs a podcast, got up on a chair with a handbell and announced least favorite. If you have not had the pleasure, it is a mixer. It is about 80 years old, and it is designed by a sadist. Everyone sits in a big ragged circle. There is always 1 chair fewer than there are people. The bell goes, everybody moves, and whoever is left standing when the bell stops has to sit on the lap of the person in the room they would least like to sit on. And then, and this is the vicious part, they stay there, as a pair, through every subsequent round until the caller lets them go. It is not a kissing game. There is nothing in it. It is a room of adults being made to admit, physically, in public, who they cannot stand. I have played it before. It is normally very funny. The bell went. We all moved. I got a chair. The bell went. We all moved. I got a chair. Nomi got left standing and sat, screaming, on the lap of a man who had reviewed her favorite game badly in 2019, and the room came apart. 3rd round. The bell went. I was 6 feet from a chair when a woman from a Bristol collective took it out from under me with the reflexes of a much younger animal, and I stood there in the middle of a function room, holding a plastic pint glass, with 300 people looking at me. And the room did not even have to say it. They said it anyway. Somebody at the back shouted it. Then it was a chant, 4 syllables, with the second one landing hard, the way rooms do, and it was not cruel exactly. It was the fair. Everybody was drunk. It was a joke that had been going for a year, and here at last was the punchline walking into the room on its own legs. Kellaway, Kellaway, Kellaway. Because she was there. She was at the edge of the circle where she always is, in the second worst chair, with her back to a pillar so she can see the door. Black roll neck, charcoal trousers, dark copper hair scraped back into a low twisted coil and pinned with a plain black wooden pin. A plain steel watch on her left wrist, worn face inward, the way people wear a watch when they check the time without letting anyone see them check the time. A glass of something clear on the floor by her foot, untouched, and in her right hand, moving without any part of her arm moving. A small, bone-colored six-sided die going over and over across her knuckles. 38 years old, 6 titles in 9 years, 3 postcards to me. She was not laughing. Everybody else in that room was laughing. She was looking at me with an expression I could not read at all, and later I would spend approximately 400 hours learning to read it. And later still I would find out what it actually was. And if you had told me that night, I would have got in the river. Rufus rang the bell and pointed at me and said, "Rules is rules." And Verity Kellaway put her drink on the floor and moved her chair back 6 inches to make room, and said, without any particular emphasis, "Well, get on with it then." I would like to say I did it with dignity. What actually happened is that I crossed 8 feet of sticky function room carpet in front of the entire British board game industry, holding a nearly empty pint glass I could not think what to do with, and sat down sideways on the lap of the woman who had rejected my game 3 times, with the specific rigid posture of a person sitting on a fence they are not sure will hold. My feet were on the floor, both of them, aggressively. If you had photographed me from the knees down, you would have thought I was in a chair. The room made a noise like a stadium. She smelled of cedar and cold rain, which is an unfair combination on a person. And the room was very hot, and her jumper was so soft that some idiotic animal part of my brain went, briefly and entirely without my permission. "Oh. Enjoying yourself?" she said, next to my ear, at a volume that reached exactly me. "Immensely," I said. "I love it here. This is the best thing that's ever happened to me. Try not to spill that on me," she said. I looked down at my glass. There were about 2 centimeters of cider in it, and I was holding it at approximately the angle of a ship going down. I righted it. Somewhere behind us, Nomi was audibly, physically dying. Rufus rang the bell for the next round, and everybody got up. Here is where the story starts, and I want to be precise about it because for about 4 seconds, it was still just a joke. And then it wasn't. I put my hand on the arm of the chair to push myself up, because that is what happens. The round ends, the pair breaks, the caller lets you go. You get up, everybody laughs, you go and stand by the radiator and want to die. And then in 3 weeks, it's funny. And her hand came flat against my waist. Not a grab. There was nothing rough about it at all. It was the size of the gesture that undid me, the sheer economy of it. 1 hand, no arm movement, the way you would stop a door from swinging shut. 4 fingers and the flat of a palm, through a cardigan with a hole in the cuff. "You don't get up," she said. I said something. I have no idea what. It was probably not a word. Rufus, who has been calling this game at this fair for 9 years and has a sense of theater, rang the bell again and shouted, "Pairs, stay together!" And the room went up like a struck match, and 11 people took a photograph, and the woman under me did not move a single muscle in her face. "The rules say the caller lets us go," I said. "He hasn't. He will in a minute. Then in a minute you'll get up," she said. Reader, he did not let us go for 40 minutes. I want to tell you what happened during those 40 minutes. And the honest answer is nothing. And the true answer is everything. And that is the entire problem with my life. Nothing happened. 6 more rounds of a stupid party game happened around us. A man fell over a coffee table. Nomi ended up on the lap of an Italian illustrator, and they are now, I understand, engaged. Somebody put music on. The room got hotter and louder and gradually stopped finding us interesting. the way a room does, and by round 5 we were furniture. And by round 6 we were alone in the middle of 300 people, which is the loneliest and least lonely thing in the world. And I sat on the lap of Verity Kellaway with my feet flat on a function room floor and cataloged her like a lunatic, the die. She never stopped rolling it over the knuckles of her right hand, out and back, one revolution every second and a half, so worn at the corners that the pips had gone soft, bone-colored, old. The watch, face inward, plain steel, a man's watch on the left wrist, the strap gone dark where it had been buckled to the same hole for years, the pin in her hair, black, lacquered, wooden, not a hairpin at all, I realized. It was a bit of a game component. It was a pawn from something with the head cut down. Her thumb on the second beat of every third revolution of the die, pressing the pip side into the pad of her index finger. That one took me 20 minutes to see, and I have never been able to stop seeing it since. And the pink. About round 4, I turned my head to say something and saw that the base of her throat, just above the black of the roll neck, had gone blotchy and hot, in patches up the side of her neck. Her face was doing absolutely nothing. Her face was a closed shop, but her throat was on fire, and I knew, in the immediate and stupid way you know things at 11 at night with 3 ciders in you, that this woman was not calm at all, and that her body was telling on her, and that she probably knew it was, and that this was very likely the single most humiliating available fact about her. I did the maths in that moment and made a decision I am still proud of. I did not mention it. "Your game," she said, about half an hour in, so quietly that I felt it more than heard it. "The typo on page 4. "I know about the typo on page 4. "Then why is it there?" "Because I printed 30 copies with my own money at the place by the station," I said. "And the man wanted 40 pounds to redo the plate, and I had 31. The die stopped. That was the first time I ever saw it happen. Mid-revolution, over the second knuckle, it just stopped dead in her hand. Half a second. Then it went again. "How many did you sell?" she said. 4. 2 of those were to Hazel," I said, in disguise. And I felt it. I want to be extremely clear that I did not hear anything and nothing showed on her face. And if you had been watching us from 6 feet away, you would have seen a tall woman looking across a room with an expression of profound boredom. But I was sitting on her, so I felt it. One small, entirely involuntary movement. Once, right the way through her. Verity Kellaway laughed at me exactly once that night, in complete silence, and I have been an unwell person ever since. At the end of the 6th round, Rufus rang the bell and shouted that the pairs were released, and the room whooped, and I stood up, and my legs had gone completely dead from holding my own weight for 40 minutes like an absolute coward. She stood up too. She is very tall, which I had not properly understood while sitting on her. She picked her untouched drink up off the floor, set it on the windowsill, and looked at me for a moment with the die closed in her fist. I said, "Because I am me. Sorry about your leg." "Where is your shop?" she said. "Sallow Street. Penny Feathers. Why?" She did not answer that. She said, "It opens at 10? 9:30. Hazel says 10, but it's 9:30. Said Verity Kellaway, and put the die in her pocket, and went out through the fire door into the rain without saying goodnight to a single person in that room, including me. Nomi arrived at my side within 4 seconds with her phone already out, and her face like a woman who has witnessed a miracle and intends to monetize it. "Maisie, don't. Maisie. Nomi, I am begging you." 211,000 views, said Nomi Bar, 19. "And it's been up for 6 minutes. I did not sleep. I lay in my flat above the launderette. Yes, that launderette, my life has a very small footprint, and I listened to the dryer that runs on a timer until midnight, and I thought about 4 words, and I did what everyone does at 2 in the morning, which is take one thing a person said and hold it up to the light from 40 different angles until it means nothing at all. You don't get up. Possibility 1. She was making a point about the rules of a game in a room full of people who make games for a living, which is exactly the sort of joke that woman would find funny, if that woman found anything funny. Possibility 2. She was punishing me for that question, and had decided the best available revenge was 40 minutes of public discomfort, which, honestly, respect. Possibility 3. I had melted my own brain on cider and the smell of cedar, and I was, at 24, going to have a very serious conversation with myself about who I fall for and why. At about 4, I got up and took the 3 postcards down off the wall, above the baize table, and read them again in the dark with my phone torch. All 3, 9 words. And I did what I have done since I was 19, when I cannot make a thing make sense. I looked at the handwriting, not ready, not ready, not ready. 3 years apart, in the same black ink, in the same fence post hand, and the full stops. Every single one of them was a hard, deep, round dot, pressed so far into the card that you could feel it on the back with your thumb. You do not push that hard on a card you do not care about. I put them back on the wall. I went to bed. I got 4 decisions worth of sleep, which is not the same as rest. And at 9:32 the next morning, in the rain, with the bell over the door still swinging, Verity Kellaway walked into Penny Feathers. It is a very small shop. I want you to hold that in your head. When she came through the door, there was suddenly a great deal less shop. She had a canvas bag over one shoulder and rain in her hair, and she did not say good morning. She stood in the middle of the floor between the family games and the ladder that has killed nobody yet, and she looked up at the shelves, all the way along, the way you look at a hand of cards. Hazel came out from behind the counter with her glasses on her chain and said, "Morning, Duck." "Good morning," said Verity Kellaway. "You've got 9 hands facing the wrong way." Hazel looked at her. Hazel looked at the shelf. Hazel, who has run this shop for 37 years and has been told what to do by exactly nobody, said, "So I have," and turned the box around, and then said, "You'll be wanting her then," and jerked her thumb at me, and went back behind the counter and started very slowly and audibly counting the till. "Is there somewhere we can talk?" said Verity. "Upstairs," I said. "There's a heater. It doesn't work." There is a staircase at the back of Penny Feathers that is basically a ladder with ambitions, and I went up it first, and about 3 steps from the top, I remembered what was pinned to the wall at the top of it, and had, I promise you, a genuine out-of-body experience. There is no way to take 3 postcards off a wall while a woman is climbing a staircase behind you. I tried. I got one. She came up into the room and stopped and looked at the wall, where 2 cream postcards in her own handwriting were pinned above a green baize table, and a 3rd one was crushed in my fist behind my back. "Ah," she said. It's a joke. It's Nomi. She's 19. It's called the Shrine of Shame." "That is a good name," said Verity Kellaway. She put her bag on the table. She took off her coat and folded it over the back of the chair. And she stood there in the black roll neck with her hair pinned up with a cut-down pawn and the rein still on her shoulders. And she looked at that room, the mismatched chairs, the paraffin heater, the window onto the back of the laundrette, the shelf of prototypes in shoe boxes with elastic bands round them, the wall of index cards, the whole 11 by 14-foot fact of my life, and something went across her face that was gone before I could name it. "Sit down," she said, and then, "Sorry, this is your table. Please, sit down." I sat down. She sat down opposite me in the player's chair and put the small bone-colored die on the baize between us and did not touch it again for an hour. "I am going to say 4 things," she said. "You will not like the first 2. "Great. 1. Last night was not a joke at your expense, and I am aware it looked like one, and that is my fault, and I am sorry." She said it in exactly the tone you would use to read out a train time. 2. I have watched that clip. 40,000 times is not accurate. It is now over 400,000, and I have been told what people call you. I said a cruel thing in a bad month to a person who asked a better question than anyone else in the room. That does not unsay it. I opened my mouth. Nothing whatsoever came out of it. 3, she said. "Gideon Pace sat down at your table yesterday at 17:31 and gave you his card. Don't ring him." And there it was. There was the thing that turned that whole hour on its axis. and I did not have the first idea what I was looking at. And so I did what I always do, which is get loud in a small room. Why? I said. Because you've decided my game's not ready 3 times, and now somebody else has decided it is? Yes, she said. I want you to appreciate that answer. I had loaded that question like a catapult, and she just walked into it and stood there. Sorry, yes? Yes, don't ring him. She looked at me steadily. That is the 3rd thing. And what's the 4th? Verity Kellaway sat back in a chair that has one short leg, in a room over a laundrette, and said, Tuesdays, 6 o'clock. Bring the box, bring the weather deck, bring the version you're embarrassed by, and not the one you show people. I'll come for as long as it takes, and I will tell you the truth about it. And at the end of it, if it's ready, you can send it to anyone in the world you like. I said, including you? Something happened at the base of her throat. 2 patches, going up. No, she said. Here is what I did with that. I want to be honest about this because I think you would have done the same. I sat in that room after she had gone, and I was furious in the specific way you are furious when somebody has apologized properly, and it has ruined the shape of a grudge you were extremely comfortable in. I had built a whole architecture out of that woman. She was the shape of the thing that was wrong. And she had come up a ladder in the rain and sat in the player's chair and taken it apart in 11 minutes and offered me the one thing I wanted more than money, and then said no to the only thing that made sense. Not for us, not for Half Crown, never for her. Hazel came up at 11:30 with 2 mugs and put mine down in front of me, the enthusiasm mug, because Hazel has a sense of humor like a hammer, and sat down in the chair Verity had been sitting in and said nothing for a while, which is her technique. She turned 9 hands round on the shelf, Hazel said eventually. She did. That's a woman who can't be in a room without straightening it. Hazel blew on her tea. What's she offering you, Duck? Tuesdays, I said. Free, until it's finished. And what's she asking for? Nothing. Hazel Pennyfeather looked at me over the top of her glasses for a long moment. Then she said, Nobody gives you a year of their Tuesdays for nothing, love. They give you a year of their Tuesdays because they've already decided something and they're too frightened to say it out loud. And then she took the biscuit tin away, because I had had 2. She came the following Tuesday at 6 o'clock exactly. I know it was exactly because I had been watching the clock since about 4:20 in a way I would describe as clinical. At 2 minutes to 6, the bell over the door went, and I heard Hazel say, Evening, Duck. And I heard a woman's voice say, Good evening, you've done the shelf. And then 21 stares. She had brought her own pencil. It was a carpenter's pencil, flat, with the lead sharpened to a chisel with a knife. That is the level we are at with this woman. Set it up, she said. 3-player, I'll take 2 of them. And then Verity Kellaway sat in a room over a laundrette in Ashwater on a wet Tuesday in October and played my game for 94 minutes without saying one single word. I have never been so frightened in my life. Not before, not since, not on the night that comes later in this story. She played it the way surgeons do things. She read every card fully before she put it down. She stacked the components in size order without appearing to notice she was doing it. Twice, she stopped and looked at the go-kart in the middle of the table for a length of time that made me want to climb out of the window. At the end, the island did not make it through the winter, which is what happens about 60% of the time. And she sat back and put the chisel pencil down and said, Your 3rd act doesn't work. Right. Do you want the reason or do you want to argue? Both, I said, in that order. The left corner of her mouth moved. I want to say a centimeter. It was not a centimeter. It was a millimeter, and I built about 4 months of hope on it, which tells you where I was. The go-kart is the best idea in this game, she said. It is better than anything in 9 hands. It is possibly the best idea anyone has had in cooperative design in 10 years, and you have hidden it because you are frightened of it. I'm not. You put it in the middle of the table, face up, and then you spend 90 minutes making it as unattractive as possible. The weather deck punishes it. The score pad shames it. The rule book on page 11 actually says, and she opened my rule book, which I had not seen her pick up, at exactly the right page without looking. Of course, nobody ever takes it. She closed it. You have written a game about a choice and then put your thumb on the scale so that nobody ever has to make it. Why?" And I sat there in a cold room with my hands round a mug with a joke on it and heard myself say, in a voice that was not the voice I do at trade stands, "Because if I make it a real choice, then somebody will take it, and then everyone else at the table will have to sit there and watch someone leave." Verity Kellaway looked at me across the green baize. "Yes," she said. "That is the game. That is how it started. Tuesdays. She came the next week, and the week after that, and the week after that. She was never late, which after a while began to feel less like manners and more like something else. She never once came at any other time. She never texted. Twice I saw her at a distance in the city in daylight, and my whole nervous system went off like a car alarm, and she did not see me, or she did, and we have never discussed it. And I cataloged her, because that is what I do. By the third Tuesday, I knew that she took tea with 2 sugars, stirred exactly once, and left the spoon in the mug, which for a woman that precise is a genuine scandal. By the fourth, I knew she had reading glasses she did not take out in front of people, and instead held the rulebook 18 inches further away. An act of vanity so human and so pathetic that it made me want to lie down on the floor. By the fifth, I knew that when she was thinking, she rolled the die over her knuckles, and that when she was about to say something that cost her, she caught it flat in her palm and did not move it at all. And that when she had decided something, she said the rule first and the reason after, always in that order, like a woman handing you the receipt before the goods. And I knew about her hands, and about the pin in her hair, and about the way she said my name, which was not Maisie. She never once called me Maisie that whole autumn. "Quill," she said, "the boat should break in round 4. The boat breaking in round 4 is the meanest thing anyone has ever suggested to me." "Yes," said Verity Kellaway. "Write it down." By the middle of November, there were 4 things on that table every Tuesday. My box, her chisel pencil, 2 mugs, and the die. She put it down at the start of every session, on the baize at her right hand, and she picked it up at the end and put it in her coat pocket. I asked her about it once, in the way you ask about a thing you have been thinking about for 6 weeks and are pretending to have just noticed. "That's off 9 hands, isn't it?" "It's off the first copy of 9 hands," she said, "the one I made in a bedsit out of a shoebox. There were 3 dice. I lost 2. You still carry it." "It's a die, Quill," said Verity Kellaway. "It fits in a pocket. Round 4. The boat." She never told me anything by answering a question. That was the whole system. Everything I learned about that woman I learned sideways, while she was talking about something else, and I learned it the way you learn a coastline in fog. That she had not designed anything since 9 hands. 12 years. That she lived 40 minutes out of the city and never once mentioned who with or whether, and that the answer was nobody, and that I would not find that out for a while. That she had been at Belcourt for 9 years and had a contract with them, and that on the third Tuesday of November her phone went and she looked at the screen and stood up and said, "Excuse me," and took it out onto the staircase. And I sat in a cold room and listened to a woman say the word no 9 times in 11 minutes in a voice that got quieter each time. She came back in. She sat down. She picked up the pencil. "Weather deck," she said. "Show me the 4 you cut." "Verity." And that was the first time I used her name. And I heard myself do it, and so did she, and the die stopped dead flat in her palm. "Don't," she said, not unkindly. "That is the thing I need you to understand about that whole autumn. Not once in 11 weeks was that woman unkind to me. She was the least unkind person who has ever frightened me." "Show me the 4 you cut," she said. I showed her the 4 I cut. Meanwhile, downstairs, my life had become a spectator sport. The clip of the party had gone everywhere. Nomi had, of course, been the one who posted it. 6 seconds, portrait, appalling audio, 300 people screaming, a woman's hand coming flat against my waist. By the second week, it had a caption that people were using on other things. By the third week, somebody had made a version where the 4 words were spelled out in Scrabble tiles. The industry had a theory, and the theory was that Verity Kellaway had publicly claimed the enthusiasm girl at a party, and I could not correct it because what was I going to say? She comes on Tuesdays and tells me my third act doesn't work? That is worse. That is so much worse. People started coming into the shop. Genuinely. Pennyfeather's turnover went up 40% in a month because strangers came in on the off chance and then bought a card game out of guilt. And Hazel, who had not had a good November since 2009, said the phrase, "Well, I'm not sorry, Duck," so often that it became her entire personality. And Nomi kept a chart, behind the counter, a physical chart on the back of a poster, in marker, which I did not know about until December. What is that? It's nothing. Nomi, what is that chart? It's arrival times, said Nomi Bar, 19. She's never later than 6, but look. And she pointed with the pen, thrilled, insane, entirely correct. 9 Tuesdays, every single week she gets earlier. First week, 5:58. Last week, 5:39. She sits in her car on Sallow Street, Maisie. I've seen her. She sits in the car for 20 minutes and then she comes in at 6. I said something like, "That's ridiculous," and I went upstairs. And I stood at the window that looks out at the back of the laundrette where you cannot see the street at all, and I put my forehead on the cold glass for a while. That night, Hazel came up with the tin and sat down in the player's chair and said, "You've stopped eating." "I've not." "You've stopped eating and you've started ironing." She let that sit exactly as long as it needed to. Duck, do you want me to say it, or do you want to go on doing this on your own for another 2 months? Say what? That woman, said Hazel Pennyfeather, has been coming here for 9 weeks to sit in a freezing room and be told nothing about herself, and she brings her own pencil. I've been alive a long while. Nobody brings their own pencil. I said, she said no, very clearly in this room. To what question, love? And I opened my mouth to answer that, and discovered that I could not, because the question she had said no to was whether Half Crown could publish my game, and I had never once, not in 9 weeks, asked her anything else. The last Tuesday in November, it rained the way it only rains in that city, sideways and personally, and the paraffin heater finally died at about 8:30. It did not die dramatically. It made a noise like a small apology and stopped, and the temperature in that room dropped so fast you could watch our breath arrive. We were 2 hours into the version with the rebuilt third act. The go card was face up in the middle of the table. We had 4 rounds to go. "We'll finish it," she said. "You'll get pneumonia." "I'll get pneumonia in round 8, said Verity Kellaway, and Drew Weather. So we finished it in our coats. And in round 7, on the island, the school went, which is the moment the game turns, and she sat and looked at the board for a long time with her hands flat on the bays. And then she reached out and, I want to be very careful here, she did not take the go card. She turned it over. You are not supposed to be able to turn it over. There is nothing on the back. It is the only card in the game with a blank back, because in every playtest for 3 years, I had watched people's eyes go to it, and I had wanted them to have nowhere to look. "Ah," she said quietly, looking at the nothing on the back of it. "That is a very cruel piece of design, Quill." "I know. Where did you learn to do that?" And I said, "Because it was 9:30 and I was freezing and I had been holding it for 11 weeks. From a woman who wrote "not ready" on a postcard 3 times and pressed so hard on the full stop that I could feel it on the other side. The rain went on doing what rain does. Verity Kellaway sat very still in a dead cold room in a coat, with a blank card in her hand, and the base of her throat had gone blotchy and pink in patches all the way up the side of her neck, and this time, for the first time, I did not look away from it. "You noticed the full stop," she said. "I've noticed everything," I said. "It's a real problem. I've got a chart." "Well, Nomi's got a chart. You sit in your car for 20 minutes. I know I sit in my car for 20 minutes. Why? Because I am 38 years old, said Verity Kellaway, and I have never in my life known what to do about anything that I want. Nobody said anything for about 4 seconds. Then I stood up so fast that the chair with the short leg went over backwards, and she stood up too, and the table was between us, and then it was not. And I got about 2 words into "I'm going to," before her hand came up and closed very lightly around my wrist. And she said, in a voice I had never heard her use, "Quill, slowly." "Why slowly?" "Because if you do it quickly, I will let you," she said. And you will have done it in a cold room over a laundrette because I said something sad, and I would rather cut my own hand off. So I did it slowly. I put my hand flat against the front of the black roll neck, over the place where I had felt her laugh in silence 11 weeks earlier, and I went up onto my toes because she is very tall and I am not. And I kissed her, and Verity Kellaway made one small sound against my mouth, like a woman putting down something extremely heavy that she has been carrying across a field. Her hand came up and cupped my jaw, thumb just under my ear, and stayed there. The rain went on. The heater stayed dead. The go-card lay face down in the middle of the table where it had never been in 3 years. You've reached the part where wanting turns into something more. If you want the hotter, uncensored GL scenes, they're on my Patreon, GL After Hours. Details in the description. Now, back to Maisie, who was about to find out exactly what those 9 words on 3 postcards had cost. She called me Maisie for the first time at 10:20 that night, on the stairs, with her coat over her arm. That is all. That is the entire scene. A woman said my first name once, quietly, going down 21 stairs in a shop that smelled of cardboard, and I sat down on the top step in the dark afterwards and put my hands over my face like something out of a film. The next 4 days were the best 4 days I have ever had, and I am aware of how that sounds this early, and I promise you the story is about to get worse. She came on the Thursday, which had never happened. She brought a heater, not a new paraffin heater, an electric one, from her own house in the boot of her car, and she carried it up 21 stairs herself and would not let me take one end, and then plugged it in and stood looking at it as though it had personally embarrassed her. "It's a heater," she said. "I can see that it's a heater. That room is 9 degrees, Quill. You have been designing in a 9-degree room for 3 years. And it is in the 3rd act. It is all over the 3rd act. Everything you write in the cold is slightly too brave." I said, "Are you criticizing my game or my flat?" "Both," said Verity Kellaway, "in that order." And that was the first joke she ever made, and I had to go and stand in the stockroom. On the Friday, she stayed until 11:30, and we did not open the box at all. On the Sunday, she sent me a photograph, no message, of a page of her own handwriting from about 15 years ago, a design note about a game she never made. And the note said, "Island, light, too sad." And I lay on my bed in a flat above a laundrette in Ashwater, and laughed until I could not breathe. And on the Monday morning, at 9:09, the email came in from Belcourt Games. It was from Gideon Pace, and it was, on the face of it, everything, an offer for The Last Fairy, £12,000 on signature, which was more money than I had ever had in one place in my life, plus royalties. Full production. 400,000 units in the first print run across 5 territories. A named illustrator I had admired since I was 16. Shelf space in every shop in the country, including, presumably, the one I was standing in when I read it. And in the 3rd paragraph of the attachment, in the part where the words go small, "The work shall be published under the editorial direction of the Half-Crown imprint, designed by V. Kellaway, with M. Quill credited as development." I read that 4 times. Then I scrolled down because there was a second attachment, and it was a press release, embargoed, dated for the following Tuesday. And it announced that after 12 years, Belcourt Games was proud to confirm a major new cooperative design from Verity Kellaway, creator of 9 Hands. A quiet human game, it said, set on an island, in a winter. And then, under that, Gideon had pasted a screenshot, because he is thorough, of an internal Belcourt document called the First Look Register, which is exactly what it sounds like. A log of everything sent to the imprint. Quill M., The Last Fairy, logged the 14th of March, declined by V. Kellaway. Quill M., The Last Fairy, logged the 2nd of April, declined by V. Kellaway. Quill M., The Last Fairy, logged the 21st of March, declined by V. Kellaway. And under that, in Gideon's actual words, which I could quote to you on my deathbed, "She's had 3 looks at this and told you it wasn't ready every time. Now she's had 11 weeks with the fixed version, and there's a Kellaway Island game in the spring catalog. I like you, champ. Sign this and at least you're in the room. I want to be honest about the next 11 hours because I have thought about them more than I have thought about anything else in my life. I did not ring her. And she was 40 minutes away. And I had her number, and I had kissed her 4 days earlier in a room she had brought a heater into. And I did not ring her because I am not, it turns out, a person who believes that anybody would choose to stay. That is the whole diagnosis. You can have it for free. I wrote an entire game about it, and I still could not see it in my own hands. What I did instead was go to the winter dinner. The Ashwater winter dinner is the industry's Christmas thing. A long room at the Corn Hall, 200 people, bad wine, an award nobody can pronounce. I had not been going to go. I put on the good dress, and I got Nomi to do my eyeliner. And I walked in at 8:30 with a phone in my hand and 11 hours of silence in me. And I found her by the window because she was where she always is, at the edge, with her back to something solid. She looked up and her whole face changed. I had never seen it do that. I had spent 11 weeks learning to read a millimeter at the corner of her mouth. And here it was doing something the size of a house, and it was, I have to say the word, it was gladness. She was glad. She started to stand up. And I said, at a volume I had chosen on the walk over, "Is it set on an island?" She stopped. "Because there's a press release," I said. Tuesday. A major new cooperative design from Verity Kellaway, a quiet human game, set on an island, in a winter. The room did not go silent. Rooms never do. But a room of that size develops a shape when something is happening in it, and the shape arrived, and about 40 people turned around and did not stop talking, which is worse. "Maisie," she said. "Don't." My voice came out perfectly level, which frightened me. 3 times, logged and declined, 3 times, and I never once asked you why, because I thought you'd tell me, because I thought, and this is the part I would give a finger to take back, I thought a woman who sits in her car outside a shop for 20 minutes every Tuesday must be there for a reason. I watched that go in. I watched it land in a public room, in a good dress, at Christmas. Verity Kellaway did not move. The blotches went up the side of her throat above the black of her collar. And this time everybody could see them. And she did not touch them. And she did not look away from me for 1 second. "That's fair," she said. "That's fair? That's it?" "It is the only true thing I can say to you tonight," she said. "So it's the one you're getting." And then she put her glass down on the windowsill and she said, "The car thing is because of you, and not because of the shop," which is a sentence I did not understand for 11 days. And she walked the length of the Corn Hall in front of 200 people who had all seen a 6-second clip of her hand on my waist, and she went out into the street without her coat. Gideon Pace was standing at the bar. He raised his glass to me about an inch. I got as far as the cloakroom before my legs went. Nomi found me on the steps. Nomi Bar, 19, who had made a chart, who had put a clip on the internet, who had a mug printed, sat down on a freezing wet step in her good coat, and did not say one word for about a minute and a half. And then she said, "Right. Say the thing about the register again." "Nomi. Say it again." "Logged what?" "Logged and declined. 3 times. 14th of March, 2nd of April, 21st of March. Nomi took her phone out. "Maisie," she said, in a completely different voice. "When did you post them?" "What?" "The 3 copies. You posted them yourself, you told me. 2nd class, from the post office on Sallow Street, because you're a maniac and you always keep the receipt." She was already scrolling. "You keep everything. You've got a shoebox of receipts under the till. When did you post them?" I went cold in a way that had nothing to do with the step. It took us 40 minutes and a shoebox. 3 receipts, 3 dates, and the register on the screenshot. Logged the 14th of March, posted the 11th. Declined and returned to me, franked and in my hands, on the 16th. 2 days. The second one, posted the 29th of March, logged the 2nd of April, back in my hands on the 4th. 2 days. "That's not a rejection," said Nomi, staring at the screen with her mouth open. "That's not, Maisie. Nobody reads a 140-card prototype in 2 days. She wasn't reading it. She was getting it back out of the building." And Hazel Pennyfeather, who I had not heard come out and who was standing at the top of the steps in a cardigan in December with her arms folded, said, "Of course she was, duck. That's the first look clause. Every publisher's had one since about 1990. Once it's logged past 7 days, it's theirs. Right, sequels, the lot, in perpetuity. And the designer goes on the box as development, whatever they promise you at the time." She came down one step. "Your friend Mr. Pace has been buying children's games off frightened 20-year-olds that way for a quarter of a century. And I have thrown him out of my shop twice." I sat on a wet step outside the corn hall and heard the whole architecture of the last 3 years come apart and rebuild itself in a different shape. 3 postcards, 9 words, sent back inside 7 days, every single time so that the thing I made in the year after my mother died would still belong to me on the 4th of April. Not ready. She had never once been talking about the game. She did not answer her phone for 11 days. I want to be clear that I deserved that, and also that it nearly killed me, and that both of those can be true at once. I rang, I texted, I wrote a message so long that my phone treated it as a document and then deleted it and sent one that said, "I got it wrong and I know what you did now," which sat there with one gray tick under it like a stone at the bottom of a well. She was not being cruel. I found that out later too. She had gone somewhere with no signal, which is what that woman does instead of crying. And she had also, and this is the part that flattened me, asked Belcourt's lawyers to write to me formally to confirm that the last fairy had never entered the register and that Belcourt Games had never had any claim on it whatsoever. That letter arrived on the 19th of December. It is 2 paragraphs long. It is the most romantic document I have ever been sent, and it is signed by a man called Trevor. On the 20th, the trade press ran the other story. "Half crown to close. Kellaway to leave Belcourt at year end. 6 titles in 9 years. Wound up in a paragraph." I went to Belcourt's offices on the 23rd of December to give back a contract by hand because I wanted to look at somebody while I did it. Their reception has a fish tank the size of my flat. Gideon Pace came down in a very good jumper because it was nearly Christmas, and men like that own leisure clothing the way they own a boat. He was pleasant. He was pleasant the entire time. I put the contract on the desk with the pages unstapled and said, "No, thank you." And he looked at it and then at me and said, "Shame, it's a nice little game." And then, because I had cost him something, and he wanted me to know what it had cost, he said it. "You do know what she's done, don't you?" I said nothing. "There's a clause in every editorial contract we write." He put his hands in his pockets. "First look, standard. Been in there since the 90s, everybody signs it, nobody reads it. Anything that comes past that desk, we have an option on it forever. She spent 2 years trying to get out of it. And in October, she finally did." He said it exactly the way you would tell someone the football score. "She sold us her 9 hands royalties. All of them. 11 languages, the reprints, the app, the lot, in perpetuity, in exchange for release from the clause, effective the 31st of December, signed it on the 7th. I said, "The 7th of October. 3 days before the fair, 2 days before a woman moved a chair back 6 inches in a function room. That's 12 years of a woman's income," said Gideon Pace, and he was for the first time in our acquaintance, telling the truth in his own voice, gone, to get out of a clause so that some kid in a shop could keep a game we could have had for £12,000. "She's got no imprint, no royalties, and no game." He smiled at me. "And now she hasn't got you either. Merry Christmas, champ." I have never in my life moved as fast as I moved between the 23rd of December and the 31st. I did not ring her again, because that had not worked, and because I had finally worked out what she is. She is a woman who does not believe in the value of what she says, only in the value of what she does, which is a very expensive way to live, and I would like everybody to stop doing it. So I did things. I rang Marchpane, who are 4 people in a converted chapel in Leeds, and have published in 9 years 3 games I would put in my coffin. I did not send them a prototype. I got on a train with the box in a carrier bag and stood in their doorway and said I would like 90 minutes of their time and that I would be paying for the sandwiches. They played it that afternoon. The island did not make it through the winter. The woman who runs it, Priya, sat back at the end and put her hands flat on the table and said one word, which was, right, and then, "Who's developed this with you?" And I said her name and watched 4 people's faces. I got the receipts photocopied. I got Trevor's letter. I got Hazel to make a phone call to a man she has beaten at dominoes since 1994, who happens to run the trade paper. And on the 29th of December, they published 4 paragraphs about first look clauses and named nobody, which in this business is the loudest possible noise. And on the 31st of December, at about 4 in the afternoon, I got on a bus and then another bus and went to Belcourt Games to see a woman clear out an office on the last day of her contract. Half Crown was one room on the second floor at the end of a corridor with a window at the end of it. It was almost empty by the time I got there. The desk was still there because the desk belonged to them. The shelves were bare. There were 9 boxes on the floor, taped, labeled in that fence handwriting, and on the windowsill a single copy of 9 Hands in Japanese that she had clearly been looking at and put down. And there was one chair. She was in it, with her back to the door, looking out at a car park in the rain in her coat with her hair coming down out of its pin, and on the desk in front of her, sitting on the wood, was a small bone-colored die. I stood in the doorway for a second and I thought, there is one chair too few. I want you to know that I understood, in that moment, exactly what I was about to do, and exactly what it would cost me if I had got any part of the last 3 months wrong. I have never been braver than I was at 4 in the afternoon on the 31st of December, in a corridor that smelled of carpet tiles. I walked in, she turned her head, and I sat down sideways on her lap, in a cleared-out office, in my coat, and put my feet flat on the floor. Verity Kellaway went absolutely rigid. For about 1.5 seconds, neither of us breathed. Then her arm came round me and her hand came flat against my waist, exactly where it had been in October, 4 fingers and the flat of a palm, and she put her forehead against my shoulder and held on. And I felt the whole enormous machine of that woman shake once, twice, and then stop. "You don't get up," I said. "No," she said, into my coat. "Apparently not." We talked until the security man came round at 7, and then we talked in the car park, and then we talked in the car, because I had discovered by then that the car is where that woman says things. She said, "I couldn't tell you. If I had told you what the clause was, you would have understood why I had to send it back, and you would have been grateful and you would have signed anything I put in front of you afterwards. You were 21 when you sent me the first one. 21. And it was the only thing you had. And it was good." She looked straight ahead through the windscreen at a wet car park. "The rule comes before the reason. The rule was that it had to be yours. That is why I could not have it. And that is why I said no to you upstairs in that shop. And I have regretted the way I said it every Tuesday since." She said, "I have not designed anything in 12 years because I stopped being able to answer my own question. A game is a promise about how long you'll stay." I could not stand behind the sentence. I had not stayed anywhere. I had a flat I do not describe, and a job I was extremely good at, and a clause in a contract. And then a girl with a hole in her cardigan stood up in the 4th row and asked me whether a game could carry an argument the players did not know they were making. And I said the single most contemptible thing I have ever said in public, because she was right, and I have been dining out on a sentence I could not live in for 12 years. She said, "I did the sums that night in October, and I signed it on the 7th, and I want to be very clear with you that it was not a gift. I did it because I could not go into another year being a person who takes things off people. You do not owe me anything for it. If you ever tell me that you do, I will be extremely unpleasant about it." And I said, "Right. Can I give you your Christmas present now? Or do you want to be unpleasant first?" And I took the Go card out of my coat pocket. The Go card, the one from the copy on the baize table, the one she had turned over on the last Tuesday in November and found nothing on the back of, except that now there was something on the back of it, in black fountain pen. in the worst handwriting in the north of England, pressed hard enough to feel from the other side. It said, "Ready." Verity Kellaway held that card in a car park for a very long time, and turned it over twice, and rubbed her thumb across the back of the full stop. "You pressed hard," she said. "So you could feel it on the other side," I said. "I learned it off a woman who sends postcards." Then she leaned across the handbrake and kissed me, and the die went off her lap and under the passenger seat. And neither of us went and looked for it for 3 days. The Last Fairy was published 14 months later by Marchpane, out of a converted chapel in Leeds, in a first print run of 9,000 copies, which sold out in a fortnight. And by the time you read this, it is in 6 languages. And there is a copy of it in a shop on Sallow Street facing the right way round, because Hazel Pennyfeather does not make the same mistake twice. It says M. Quill on the front, in the bottom corner, in 8-point type, because I would not let them make it any bigger. On the back of the box, in the small print, under the components list, it says, "Developed with V. Kellaway." She fought me on that for 6 weeks. She lost, mostly because Priya took my side, and partly because I had by then learned exactly what to do to make the base of that woman's throat go pink, which is a power I intend to use responsibly for the rest of my life. The rules are the same rules. The boat still breaks in round 4. The school still goes in round 7, which is the moment people put their hands over their mouths, and about 60% of the time the island does not make it through the winter. There is one change. In the published edition, the Go card does not have a blank back anymore. It has one line printed on it, small, in the middle of all that empty space, so that when somebody picks it up and turns it over, and they always turn it over, they read, "A game is a promise about how long you'll stay." She did not know I had done that until she opened the first production copy at the kitchen table of a house that is 40 minutes out of the city, and that I now describe constantly to anyone who will listen. She read it. She put the card down. She said, "Quill," in a voice that had gone completely to pieces, and then she said nothing else for about a minute, and I made the tea and left the spoon in the mug, which is a scandal, and which is how I say things. The following October, we went back to the Ashwater Fair. I had a table on the second floor with 9,000 copies behind me instead of 30, and Nomi ran it in a headset like a woman landing aircraft. And Hazel came for 2 hours and told 4 separate strangers that she had known all along, which was not true, and which she has now said so many times that it has become true. And at 10 o'clock, in the function room above the weighing house, with the windows white and 300 people in coats, a man called Rufus got up on a chair with a handbell and announced, "Least favorite." Verity was at the edge of the circle, where she always is, in the second worst chair, with her back to the pillar. Black roll neck, coil of dark copper hair pinned with a cut-down pawn, a steel watch worn face inward, a small bone-colored die going over and over across her knuckles, out and back, out and back. The bell went. Everybody moved, and I did not move at all, because I had been standing behind her chair for 4 minutes waiting for it. And 300 people watched the enthusiasm girl walk into the middle of a function room floor, with a chair free on either side of her, and sit down sideways on the lap of the coldest publisher in the business, on purpose, with her feet up off the floor. The room came apart. Somebody rang the bell about 9 times. Rufus, professional to his bones, shouted, "Pairs, stay together!" Verity's hand came flat against my waist. Her mouth was at my ear, and the base of her throat was pink, and her whole face was doing the thing the size of a house. "You've cheated," she said. "There were enough chairs." "There's always one chair too few," I said. "You just have to know which one it is." And I put my hand over hers and I said it. "You don't get up?" She didn't.